Stay tuned for the Joan Quinn Profiles. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, LA Style, and Detour magazines, Joan covered the social set, the Hollywood hotshots, the international art scene, the mysteries of food, the excitement of travel, and the fabulous world of fashion. Joan continues to find creative people on the cutting edge who make things happen. Here's Joan Agajanian Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn. We have a great show for you. Our guests are author Brenda Venus and artist Gregory Edwards. Brenda Venus is an actress, dancer, and model who writes. She was born and raised in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and now lives in that well-known zip code 90210. Brenda has made guest appearances on TV, has worked on the stage, and has several film credits. She's written 2 books of note: Dear, Dear Brenda, The Love Letters of Henry Miller to Brenda Venus, published by William Morrow, and for Dutton, The Secrets of Seduction. Welcome, Brenda.
Hello, Joan.
Hi. I looked up Venus in the dictionary, and it means the goddess of love. It also means the brightest star in the solar system. Did you change your name, or was that your name?
No, I was born with that name.
Is that right?
My father was a politician. He was a cop, and then he got into politics. And I used to have to hold up signs when I was a kid saying, "Vote for Joe Venus." So, yeah.
It really was?
Really, yeah.
The New York Post called you the modern-day Venus. What did they mean when they said that?
Well, I've got arms, you know. I mean, that's one thing.
When you wrote your first book,
The Dear, Dear Brenda.
The Dear, Dear Brenda.
The Love Letters of Henry Miller.
You have always, to me, as long as I've known you, been known as the last lover of Henry Miller.
Well, that's because I think I was there until the day he died, so I spent the last 4.5 years with him. And he wrote me about 4,000 letters, actually.
How old was he when he died?
88. He
And when
died
did
in
you...
June of 88, and I met him in June.
But you were so young.
When I was at Ole Miss, I went to college and I read him. That was the first time I'd read Tropic of Cancer. And I, somehow or another, I thought then that I would one day meet Henry Miller. So I wrote him a letter. That's how all that started.
Oh, you did? Mm-hmm. And then he started writing?
I was a great fan of his. And I had a fire and lost a lot of things, and I think I was kind of in shock. And I don't know what it was, but something kept saying, get a hold of Henry Miller, write Henry Miller. So I did. Wrote him a letter.
When you talk about being the last lover, was he a lover to you in the fullest sense of being a lover?
No, I think mostly it was on paper. He was my mentor, and I was his, gave him a reason to live. We were great friends with each other, very supportive.
You brought one of your letters with you.
Yeah, one of my first letters, actually. This was in '76.
And how does it start? Just a...
Darling Brenda, just a few words now, more tomorrow, to tell you how very precious you are to me.
Oh, and then it ends, bless you, my darling Brenda. Henry. That's sweet.
Yeah.
Did he paint you as well?
He was sort of blind in one eye. So when he did paint, he had to get way down into the canvas or the paper that he used. So it didn't really look like me, and yet he caught a complete essence. He painted me as a Navajo.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. With all those wonderful colors. And
do you have any Indian blood?
I am
American
Navajo.
Indian? Oh, you are? You mean he just picked it up?
No, in our letters we would tell each other a lot about our lives, and also we would meet on Thursdays, and if I felt he needed to see me, I would go to his house.
We have a portrait of you here, but it's not by Henry, it's by another wonderful painter.
And actually they knew one another. Henry and Harold knew each other.
This is by Harold Frank.
Right, and who lives in Beverly Hills right now, actually.
He's a terrific painter. He had his biggest, I think, painting days during the 60s, as I recall. I mean, he's like a part of that art history from the 60s. But he seems to have been obsessed with you as well.
When I first met Harold, because he's very intellectual, and I wanted to know so much about art, he had all these books, and it was incredible to sit down and talk with him over wine or coffee or tea or whatever we had, and he would just sort of explain art to me. And then we'd go in the other room, and sometimes he would paint me.
But he painted you many, many times as well.
For many years, he painted me over and over again. Yeah.
I mean, it's the same kind of obsession, like with the 4,000 letters?
Yeah, I would say more like a Modigliani, who, when he paints, most of his women look the same. Picasso, there's a certain thing in their art that you can distinguish one artist from another. And I think that Harold liked something about the way I looked. And he probably painted women that looked like me before he met me.
One of the other things that I was thinking about when I was reading your Secrets of Seduction, it is dedicated to Henry Miller.
Yeah.
Is it really just a man's book? Is that why it's dedicated to him?
No, I've had more women, I've got more letters actually from women saying thank you for writing this book. And the reason I wrote it is because when I did the Dear Dear Brenda book, a lot of the letters I got were from women saying, would you write and tell my husband this, or tell my boyfriend to communicate with me better, or, and I didn't know quite, you know, so I started reading a lot and jotting down notes. And then it came, that's how the book started to form.
So did it take a long time?
It was something that I feel was very needed.
So do you think women are reading the book as well as men?
I think I almost have more women reading the book than I do men. And they're giving it to their husbands, and they're giving it to their lovers, because you can always learn.
One of the things, talking about always learning, I think one of the things, one of the chapters talks about dating for the first time, and how a man doesn't want to be a jerk, and you have a list of things that says
that they do.
Don't be a jerk and do it this way.
Because
tell us a couple of them.
Well, for some reason, manners are very important to me and to the women that I spoke to, and a lot of men, after they've had their date and they feel they've done, you know, their duty, will come in and put their feet up on your table and ask to be for a drink, you know, or anything. But that's not nice, because it's like saying, all right, you know, I feel at home here now, so you can wait on me. And there's just certain things that men do, and like, for example, they sometimes walk in a woman's room or her house before they take her on the date, and they say, just a moment, Amy, and then they turn on the score to some game they've been listening to. Well, there's really, I mean, I love sports myself, and there's nothing wrong with, you know, trying to keep abreast, but it makes her feel like she's not very important when you do that.
That's one of the no-nos, is that...
you have to make her feel important.
I have a list.
Okay.
The eager beaver.
Yeah, the one that really comes on to you and is all over you, groping before before you realize what's going on. And she spent a lot of time on that hair and that makeup. You know, you know, I mean, you have to be a little bit more considerate, I think.
Another one was the timing.
You'll be in a movie, and something will touch a woman, and she may start crying, and the guy goes, vulnerable. So, you know, he'll take that moment to try to kiss her or, you know, do something else. And I say, you know, fellas, if you just waited, you get past that moment, wipe that tear off her face. She's just going to love you so much, because that's endearing.
Kissing.
I do a whole chapter on teaching men to kiss, because it's so important to women, and it's so essential to be a good kisser, because that's what gets the juices flowing in us ladies. So kissing is up at the top.
Up at the top. One of the other things that you mention in the book about no-nos and you can't be a jerk on your first date is the big one. That's what how you title it, the big one. I think that's everything rolled into one as they finish dating, as they come home.
Oh, and they start to take advantage, sort of thing?
Yes.
Yeah. We were talking before the show about the college in Yellow Springs, Iowa.
Antioch.
Antioch. And I really like that they have these rules, because what we're lacking, I feel, in good lovemaking and in good relationships is that communication. And men have been doing the same thing over and over again, making love the same way, and they don't realize that every woman needs a different set of touching and kissing, and because every woman is different. So if a man thinks he's a great lover with one woman, it doesn't necessarily translate to he'll be a great lover with me. So I'm really glad that they are starting this on the campuses. I think it's
are they
very
teaching
necessary.
a class? Is that what you?
All the freshmen, they have to go and learn the rules for, they're trying to prevent that date rape and all those things that are happening.
That is interesting.
And I think it's incredible. I mean, just think about that generation, how that's going to be, because they've communicated. And you don't have to say, can I touch you there? I mean, you could say, does that feel good? You know,
well,
am I
one of the
pleasing
things,
you?
you know, you talk about these no-nos, and they sound to modern day women a little bit archaic, almost Victorian.
Well, this one lady said, you don't really teach us anything. Everything in your book has been said before. Well, my answer to that is yes, everything has been said before. There will not be one original idea. It's just what slant you put on it. And mine was that because so many women are saying the same things, and because they're not enjoying sex as much as they should, and because they're faking orgasm so much, it's made very simple.
You don't think
that they understand.
You don't think it goes back to your Southern upbringing?
About what?
About being kind of Victorian in your approach to things?
We learn at a very early age, Southern women, to please men and to really cater to their needs. And so I grew up really loving men and also maybe understanding them a little better. And also sports. I mean, I was, my father taught Little League Baseball, and I was there helping him, being his assistant. So, and I was a cheerleader, you know, in school. So I just love men, and I think that because we speak different languages, I think they just don't quite get it. And so this book is more the mechanics of how to treat us, what we're like, what we want and don't want, and I think that helps men out a lot.
One of the last things I want to ask you before we leave is you address the situation of where to meet men and what to wear. So why don't you just give us a brief account of that?
Well, I was on tour. I realized that people are now meeting in bookstores because they're putting wonderful they're not restaurants upstairs, but
coffee houses.
Like a little coffee place. And you sit down with the book you just bought and your coffee, and the man can approach you, and at least he has something to say. Do you like that book, or I've read that writer, or, and I think that's a wonderful place to meet.
And how should you be dressed at a place like that? Seductively?
Seduction, it comes from feeling comfortable with yourself. And if you are clean and you feel good with who you are and like yourself, I think that's your first step.
Have you met the man of your dreams before we leave?
He lives in New York.
You have met the man of your dreams?
Yes, I've been dating him now about a year and a half.
Have you been using all of your secrets?
He actually
Or has he been using them?
He helped me with the chapter on anatomy.
Oh, great.
Yes, he really helped me a lot with that.
Well, I think we learned a lot from you today, and we're glad that you were with us, and thanks very much.
Thank you.
And don't go away, because we'll be right back with artist Gregory Edwards. Hi, we're back, and I'm Joan Quinn. I'm with painter Gregory Edwards, who attended Cal Institute of the Arts, the Art Institute in San Francisco. His paintings have been exhibited in museums and galleries across America, and collectors like Peter Coyote, Bud Yorkin, Dr. Leon Banks, and the Grinstein family own Greg's works. Over the years, he's lectured and he's taught. He's taught a lot. Hi, Greg. Welcome.
Thank you.
We're happy you're with us.
It's good to be here.
What specifically have you taught?
When I first started at Cal Arts in the early 70s, I taught a course called the Black Artist Seminar, which included artists like James Earl Jones, Charles Lloyd, the saxophone player, Marvin Hardin, the painter.
people from all different venues of the arts.
Yeah, because CalArts was a school, 5 schools in one, and so to develop a course that was meaningful to all the students, I felt more comfortable including artists from all areas as opposed to just the visual arts.
How long ago was that?
That was 22 years ago.
Well, you said you started with that kind of program because there were no African Americans on faculty or very few in the arts. What was the...
There were lots of African American artists in Los Angeles, historically there have always been lots of African American artists in Los Angeles, but there were none on staff at that time.
I see.
And so I was asked as a student to develop a course, and as a result of developing that particular course, things have changed. And
we don't have those problems like that anymore, do we?
Well, that's a point of view that there are people such at CalArts that there's a dean in the School of Art now, and but we still feel there's more that can be done.
The thing is, ever since I've known you, you've been an art activist. You've always been there to support the arts. You've always been there helping out. Has it only been for African Americans?
No, I've always tried to come from a multicultural point of view, because America has, and especially Los Angeles, has people that are descended from every kind of person that ever lived on the planet. And it's always been my philosophy that if we were to include more and more of these types of people and not just go with the traditional types, we might get answers that are different than the ones we have. And although I'm sure we'll continue to have problems, we wouldn't perhaps have the problems that we do have.
I think in keeping with what you're saying, it almost points to why you've had so much administration in your background. I wondered how that came about.
I got a job at the Citywide Mural Project in 1977, and they asked me to put on a conference called The Role of Government and Business in the Support of Public Art. And it was intriguing to me because in high school I had been involved in forensic, giving speeches, the debate team, that kind of thing. And so it intrigued me that I'd have this opportunity to put together a real symposium. And once I did it very well.
So that was a natural thing?
Yes.
Then you became a director of the Z.
That's Studio Z.
Studio Z. Where was it?
An alternative space on Slauson and 2nd Avenue in the Crenshaw district.
Ah.
And artists such as David Hammonds, Houston Conwell, Marion Hassinger, Joe Ray, Rojo were all integral parts.
Did they teach there?
Rarely did they teach. What we would do would be to provide space for performances, exhibitions.
Oh, I see.
And it was more of a wide open kind of scene, and if you were there you could learn a lot, but nobody was actively teaching.
I see. The other thing, you were involved in a pilot program with the NEA. I'm going back over all this administrative kind of stuff, and then I want to talk about your art.
Well, that was a lot of fun. Jim Melchert from UC Berkeley was a director of the visual arts program at NEA. And he called and asked me if I would be liaison between the NEA and the Small Business Administration to put this program together. And I guess one of the things that I've always been good at is putting people together.
Yeah.
And you know, to use, for lack of a better term, mediating people when they come together. And I was a natural for that, and I really enjoyed myself, and I think Jim enjoyed having me.
But then, when you look at the NEA, you see that they have good programs, and they do give money to things that should be done. I think the NEA has gotten a bad name, and to hear someone like you talk from, when was it, 1976 or 7 or something like that?
I think it was 79 when that started. Went from 79 to 81.
So yeah, you were working with them and getting something really important done.
And they did and still do a lot of very important things. I think they were bad rapped mainly because they were an easy target. or they were perceived as an easy target. I don't think that Senator Helms expected anywhere near the amount of flack that he got back once he attacked the arts.
But the art community is very strong and very cohesive.
Yes.
You also worked with me on the California Arts Council. You were on the advisory panel for the Art and Public Building program. What did you think of that program?
I love that program. I thought that the idea of bringing artists together with the design teams and the architects from the initial phases of design was the most brilliant thing that has come out of, one of the most brilliant things that have come out of the Arts Council. I'm sure you've done many other things as well.
But I love that idea of starting down at the bottom and putting everybody together and letting them create together.
In these times, it's sort of taken as a given when CRA or the Metro Rail puts together something, they bring in artists right at the beginning, and it's a given. But in the times that we started working together, there was a lot of controversy because people weren't used to that.
I think we did bring that to the forefront, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Well, talking about all of this kind of, I guess, background work that you've done, doesn't it take you out of your studio? When do you have time to paint?
I have a lot of time to paint. Being an abstract painter does not mean, you know, going and putting your nose to the grindstone for 12, 14 hours a day. It really means painting 4, 5, 6 hours a day, and you have a lot of extra time to make phone calls and do the kind of work that's required of administrators. I used to stay in my studio a lot more before 1976, but an old friend, Catherine White, challenged me to go out and see Christo's running fence.
Oh.
And just taking that trip and seeing how Christo had worked with the public inspired me. And now I derive a lot of my inspiration from what I see out in the streets, from what I see out in the fields or in the forest.
That was very important because he couldn't have done any of his installations without the cooperation of the people in those sites. Well, you talked about being an abstract painter. What is the name of this painting that's here? And what does it tell us? What do all these lines mean? How do you tell a story in this abstract kind of way?
This painting is the name of this painting is Mr. Charles. It was painted in 1987, and it was painted for my great friend Charles Whitehead, who was a chauffeur and who lost the use of his legs in an automobile accident. And Charles was one of those people who, upon receiving this serious blow to his life, just showed us all, you know, the kind of perseverance that you don't think you have in you until something like this happens. And most of us don't think we have it when something like this happens. But this guy never complained. He never gave it a single moment's thought that he wouldn't be able to go on and be a vibrant person in life. And so when I tell a story in this, these lines, the color, to me represents the spirit of Charles, you know, the motion. And there's a space for abstract painters that is created in the process of painting that there's a depth in the painting and there's a depth in the human being.
So you actually are telling a story, but how does the public relate to this? If you didn't tell us the story of that, I would look at it and say, I love the color, I love the depth, and this is really interesting the way he's done these. I thought they were African symbols.
Yes.
Are they?
They're not, but they're based on African symbols.
And that's all I would get out of it. I wouldn't know the story of him.
I think that the intensity of my emotion in the process of painting is what comes through in the painting. And the fact that I name the painting after a person who has given me so much relates to the viewer in the sense that they get that intensity.
So they feel, if you like it, it's something that you feel, or you can see what the artist has put into it.
Yes.
This is something new to me, this big painting on the set. I haven't seen this work, and it looks almost representational, and I thought all you did was abstract work.
Well, this is from an earlier period when, for me, there was more of an interest in color field painting, more of an interest in symbolism. I started out by studying African systems of symbols, and at a certain point I realized that I was going to have to create my own body of symbolism. And this painting is basically, the name of it is Team Picture, and it's about my family, because my father always referred to our family as the team. I see. And so the symbols in it, especially the representational ones, are about things that he touched or that my mother touched
I see.
in their everyday working life.
I see.
Yes.
The other thing that I always think about with you is your love for paper. You always, it seems like you always work on paper. Why do you love paper so much? And are papers different?
Yes, there are a vast number of different kinds of papers. And when I started painting in the late 60s, there was a question in the art world: are works on paper art, or do you have to work on canvas?
Are they important enough to stand up in a museum?
Well, it was always my feeling that I ran into Rembrandt etchings, 16 of them, in the Clark Museum in Williamstown, Massachusetts. There was never any question to me as to whether or not they would stand up because of the experience that I had with them. But recently I've begun to work on canvas, and I've fallen in love with canvas. Oh,
did your love affair with paper end?
It didn't end. I'm still working with paper. I still have a huge collection of different kinds of paper, and I intend to work on paper.
Before we leave, I want to ask you one question. I know you come from a large family, and you're from Texas, I think. Your brother is sculptor Melvin Edwards. His work is in the Modern Museum and in museums across the country. The two of you had a show in New York, I don't know, 81 or something like that?
Yes.
How did it work? How did two brothers together in a museum situation work? Did it relate, the work?
Absolutely, it related. My brother's 11 years older than I am, and I was very fearful of showing with him because he is such a huge presence in the New York scene. But he was very caring. He took care of me. He didn't try to hog the space, even though his paintings are, I mean, his sculpture is huge, and monumental in some cases. But he worked with me, and he always would look to me and say, you know, is this